Hey guys, Ken Smith. So I've had a couple of questions, actually I've had several questions since Danny and Brian caught that giant stringer cranking. What do I like as a big crankbait rod? And I know this is a struggle for a lot of guys. I'm not saying that's calling your shot, but
Full sack of fish right there. 20.
big fish, Mike. So I'm going to show you 6 rods here and kind of give you my take, good and bad. These are all loose rods, but the good and bad of these rods. So the first rod is the rod they call the perfect crankbait rod. I now have 3 of these rods. This is a 7-foot 3-inch rod. I'm going to tell you, this is a what I would call a square bill rod. This is, in my mind, a more traditional, almost fiberglass feeling rod. It's got a it's a moderate action. It calls itself a medium heavy. It is far from a medium heavy. This is a square bill rod. This is a Rapala 6 rod, 100x 50x, a swank rod. I throw my swank on this rod. It's a great little, very inexpensive rod. It's in the TP1 series. That's a nice rod, but that is not a deep cranking rod. So I'm going to give you 5 deep crankbait rod options. The first rod option is a 9-footer, and it's the David Fritz model. And this rod, I'm just really curious to see what this rod weighs. This rod's weighting to me seems heavy. I have not weighed it yet. So this rod's weight, see if I can do this somewhere where I can get it weighed. That rod weighs 7.68 ounces. Now let's counter that to the 9-foot Mark Rose ledge fishing rod. Now, significantly different price point on these 2 rods. That rod weighs 7.22 ounces. I will tell you, this rod, to me, is weighted much better than this rod. Very different price points, similar handles, full cork, and whatever they call that stuff. This is a 9-foot rod. This is the rod when you're, quite literally, it's called the ledge fishing series, when you are needing to rifle a bait and a big bait. This is a C20, a C25, Strike Kin 10XD. When you got those big heavy baits, you need to fling a really long ways. That's the rod. I'm curious now that I've said that. Let's see what they say the weight is. It says lure weight 1/8 ounce, which there's no way you could throw an 1/8 ounce with this bait, up to 3/4, and I believe that. I think you could probably actually even throw a big swim bait on this rod if you're fishing with a team partner and have somebody help you net fish, because a 9-foot rod, netting fish gets really hard. This is the other rod in that ledge fishing series. Now this is the next rod down, so that's the monster, right? This one's called Magnum Crankbaits 3. Turn my scale back on. I'm going to guess this one's a little lighter because it's quite a bit shorter. That rod only weighs 5.19 ounces. I will tell you, this is an expensive rod. And the next rod I'm going to show you is about half the price of this rod. But this is the easiest throwing rod. I'm not saying Mark Rose is lazy. I don't know Mark Rose. But this rod just loads beautifully. So if you've never gone out with a rangefinder and seen how far you can throw a big crankbait like a C25 or a C20, a long cast is 80 or 90 yards. I've gone out with my golf rangefinder and thrown at poles. You can throw one 100 yards, but you got to have a little wind at your back, and I'm sure young guys probably can throw it 100 more regular than an old guy like me can. This rod to throw on 50 or 60 yards is super easy because of the way the rod loads through here. It just, I really like this rod, and I got to tell you, I didn't think I would. I really like this rod. I've also played with this rod a little bit as a trap rod. It's a little soft on the end to snap it out of the grass. This next rod is not. I'm gonna tell you right now. So this rod replaces, bear with me. So you remember the original Lew's black and white rods. So these were the custom speed sticks. That is now the custom speed sticks. They went from the black and white. Now, some of the black and whites you'll see me throw like the Super Duties, that's a different series rod. But this rod replaced this rod. I love this rod. Here's why I love this rod. So Sarah has had a problem in the past with this, right? This thing is too big around for her to palm that reel and also the rod. Look what they've done here. There's a name for it, and I'll put it down below. I can't remember what they call this. But you actually tighten the reel on there from the bottom, so it's straight contact to the rod blank. That is the most comfortable rod I've ever held as far as reel in my hand and rod in my hand. So that's the first thing I love about this rod. But I love the action of this rod. Now this is the 3, I do believe. Yeah, so this is the CMBR3. They call it a crankbait rod. I'm gonna tell you right now, there's a lot of uses for this rod. This is what I've been throwing that chatterbait on as well. So this rod weighs nothing. That rod weighs 4 1/4 ounces. It is a super light, super comfortable rod. And I was throwing a C20 with this rod. I did not throw the 25. The 25 feels a little bit too heavy on it. It says 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce. Now, I'll tell you, this rod loads differently. It doesn't have as soft a tip up here. So there's a little more effort in throwing a crankbait a long ways, but it's super sensitive. I think it's maybe a little more sensitive than out of the rod, again, because of how those rods load. This is a super rod. It's a $150 rod. I'll put a link below to this rod. I love this rod. Now, because I love that rod, I didn't grab it. This is the wrong one. No, this is it. This is the CBR2. Just a slightly lighter action. And I think, again, I'm using this rod for a bunch of stuff. I think this is a rod, probably would be, as a matter of fact, I probably am going to drop to this one. And when I say drop, a little bit lighter action, throwing my chatterbaits in the future. I just didn't get, as you probably saw this weekend, I didn't eat chatterbait bites. But I'm real curious how this rod's going to work. I think I'm going to go from the 3 to the 2. But I'm going to tell you right now, either one of these, for Cincos, flukes, if you're not in super tight quarters where you need a shorter rod for spinnerbaits, they're probably a smidge too light for swim jig rods. You probably want a little bit heavier rod, probably that Super Duty 2 rod for swim jig rod. But if you're trying to buy just a few rods at a little bit lower price point, I highly recommend those CM, and I'm going to do it again so I don't get it wrong. I want to say CM CBR. Yeah, CBM CBR 2 is the lighter action. 3 is the slightly heavier action. Those are awesome rods. So that's all. And again, I did tell you, the only rod in that group that I don't love is that David Fritz rod. It's just it's a weighting, and maybe you'll like it more, but the weighting on it is different to me. But those Mark Rose ledge rods, they're expensive, but holy cow, those rods, and that one, that smaller one, I get them confused. One of them is called Long Range, and one of them is called Magnum. I think the Long Range is the Big Daddy. Well, it doesn't say, but it's the TLCPLRCB. It's a 9-footer, right? You can't forget it. But that's if you got to throw it, I'm going to say 100 yards, 90 to 100 yards. But if you're just trying to throw it 50, 60 yards comfortably, or you're throwing a little bit smaller bait, by the way, I threw a C25 and a C20 on this, and I'd be fine, comfortable throwing a 10XD on this rod. The way it loads, it loads and it just launches that crankbait. That's a really fine rod for just easy throwing for us old guys. So hope that helps. I'll give you guys, I got some more rods. I'm swapping some rods out. I got some more stuff coming in, and I'll give you guys updates on what I like and what I don't like as those come in. So thanks for tuning in. We will see you guys again here real soon. Thanks, guys.